There's the bell, and that means we're back with a new SC Charter Chatter episode. This is a podcast dedicated to charter schools in South Carolina. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Kevin. We are presented by the Public Charter School Alliance of South Carolina. An absolutely fantastic episode for you today. But before we get to our guests, I want to share just a couple of things we have coming up. Don't miss our 2024 Leadership Summit, April 9th in Columbia. A great time to gather as a charter community. Great sessions like the power of teamwork, school safety, leadership coaching, and how you can be an advocate for your school. Register at scharterschools.org. Again, scharterschools.org. Okay, today it is my distinct honor to talk to our guest, a South Carolina native, a true trailblazer, and a living testament to the power of dreams and determination, General Lloyd Fig Newton. General, welcome to SC Charter Chatter.
Kevin, thanks so very much. It's great to be on. It sounds like an exciting time in the charter business, so I'm happy to have the opportunity to chat with you.
Well, your journey is truly remarkable and inspiring, and that's why I'm so excited to share your story today. As someone who had a dream, went out and achieved it, not without adversity, broke through the barriers of segregation, you defied early circumstances and expectations, rising to the rank of a 4-star general in the United States Air Force, and more recently in 2018, being on the founding members of Polaris Tech Charter School. So, General, let's start with growing up in rural South Carolina and what led you to the military.
Okay, well, very good. Yeah, I grew up down in the low country, a little town called Ridgeland, South Carolina. It's down near Beaufort, Hilton Head. And if you're heading south, it's just north of Savannah, Georgia. So you get to Ridgeland before you get to Savannah. And growing up there, I grew up on a small farm with my parents, of course, and all of my siblings. It was a total of 10 of us initially. Mom lost a couple of children at birth. So it was 8 of us for a long period of time. But grew up on that little farm and went to a rural South Carolina school. Again, as you mentioned, it was the segregated South during that time. So went to an all-black high school. But I saw a number of military folks as my father, particularly on the weekend. We would go to town in Ridgeland, and then on the way back, a number of military was on US 17, and they would be thumbing a ride. My dad would pick them up, and I saw these uniforms, and I wanted to be in the uniform. So this dream of being in the military was with me ever since I was a childhood. And so it led from there to me later years graduating from high school, then went to Tennessee State, Nashville, went to Air Force ROTC and joining the Air Force at that time. So it was that was the first part of the dream coming true.
Absolutely. And you and I talked a little bit about this interview and being on the podcast and everything. And we're on the heels of Black History Month. But as you and I discussed, it's always a good time to celebrate accomplishments and shine a light on important achievements and milestones. General, you were the first African-American pilot with the U.S. Air Force demonstration team, the Thunderbirds. What did this accomplishment mean to you personally? And how do you reflect on its significance in the broader context of diversity and representation in the military?
Yeah, I first saw the Thunderbirds when I was at Tennessee State in Nashville. They were doing an air show at an air base just outside of Nashville, and I went along with a number of my classmates to see the air show. And then when we arrived, the team was performing at the time, and they were doing things. I was already in an aviation program and an aviation major in school, but they were doing things with airplanes that just seemed to be totally impossible. And when they landed, all of them taxied in formation. All the canopies came up. These gentlemen stepped out and got on the wing of the aircraft, and their beautiful blue show suits. And I said to myself then, when I grow up, I want to be just like these guys. And so I came into the Air Force with that dream in mind. And then I went to flight school in the Air Force, made it through that. really wanted to get a fighter because that's the first step in being a Thunderbird.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was fortunate enough to get a fighter, F-4 Phantoms, out of flight school as my combat aircraft. And then I just started preparing and building the time to get enough hours so I could apply, which was 1,000 hours of fighter jet trainer time.
Wow.
But immediately out of flight school, I found myself in the middle of Vietnam and the war.
Mm-hmm.
So we definitely generated some hours while I was there.
Sure.
So, the first time I saw the team again would have been in 1964. And I stayed with that dream, not making the team the first time when I applied, not making it the second time when I applied, but making it the third time when I applied. Mm-hmm. Which was now in 1974. So 10 years later is when that first part of the dream came true again, So, and my point to young people there is if you have the dream, stay with it.
Right.
And then, just stay with it. And then 9 times out of 10, it's going to come true if you work at it hard enough.
Sure.
And that's what happened with me.
Sure.
Now, back to diversity and the military and all of that, particularly when I first came in the Air Force, we were dealing with many of the same issues that our society was dealing with, as racial discrimination
mm-hmm.
and so on. And fortunately for me, I was a part of a group of us who helped to initiate programs such that we could break down those racial stereotypes, racial barriers. How do we get a conversation going with all of our people in the Air Force? And so, again, I was a part of a group that helped to develop and first instructing what we called then race relations in the Air Force. And it paid us big dividends.
Sure.
Now, with reference to me, joining the Thunderbirds, it wasn't about me being the first anything on the team, other than I wanted to be a member of the team.
Right.
History just worked out in a way, and the timing was that when I got selected, all of a sudden people started talking about, oh, you're the first African American pilot, So it wasn't, and I never thought of myself really as being African Thunderbird Thunderbird pilot. I always just thought of myself as being a Thunderbird pilot who happened to be African American.
Right.
So that's really how that came about, how it was initiated, and again, I just stayed with the dream, and obviously it was one of the high points of my career.
I can't imagine what that ride literally would be like in a Thunderbird in formation, inches away from your counterparts.
I try to tell folks I've flown faster, gone farther, and done more things than I ever could have meant when I was growing up in South Carolina. So the Thunderbirds was a big part of that. Still is today.
Absolutely.
Still is today.
Absolutely. Well, we know, kind of keeping along some of that theme there, we know it's important for young people to have role models to look up to, who look like them, who are similar to them. How does that resonate with you as a leader?
Yeah. All of us want to, no matter who we are, we all want to feel valued and respected and feel good about ourselves. And you do that. One of the processes, part of the process that makes that happen is when you have a dream like I did, and you see others who are, a part of that dream ahead of you, then it gives you some confidence that, you can get there, and again, that's what has happened to me all of my career, and basically all of my life. If you put in the effort to achieve that dream, then there are going to be somebody who are just going to say, hey, look like this individual is really trying to do something,
mm-hmm.
and they will give you a hand. So the idea of having others that look like you is important. It's not, to me, that is not near as much of an issue today as it was back, that
sure
1960s when I came in, when there again were no Black Air Force Thunderbird pilots or there were a number of places where we just weren't well represented. And some of that still exists today, but not near as much. Why? Because we have so much media available to us. If you want to find somebody, all you have to do is pick up the little phone that's in your hand and tap it a couple of times, and something's going to pop up.
That's right.
So I don't buy in to the total philosophy of, well, there wasn't anybody else that looked like me. No, you just maybe didn't look far enough or hard enough.
Sure.
Okay. So all of that is there. And every ethnic group that you can think of that is in our country, they have made some contribution to this country.
Sure.
And so what I try to do with young people, that no matter, who they are, what their backgrounds happen to be, I try to let them understand that, hey, look, your circumstances does not define who you will be or what you can be in the future. It is the decisions that you're making today that will clearly define that. And if you take that at heart and work at it from that standpoint, I think you can go as far and do almost anything your God-given power will allow you to do.
And I would have to say that you are a prime example of believing in that and doing that, accomplishing just that. I think if you were to let your circumstances growing up in a segregated South define who you are, I don't know what you may have accomplished or what you would have become, but you certainly didn't let that stop you from achieving your dreams and taking you, like you just said a few minutes ago, to heights unimaginable, both literally and literally and others. So
yeah. But I will also add, that this didn't happen all by myself.
Sure.
I mean, obviously, there were individuals who suggested to me early on when I was in high school, for instance, and my instructors knew I wanted to come in the military, and I almost came in the military right out of high school. And one of my high school instructors suggested to me, said, well, you got a good head on your shoulder. Why don't you go to college and then you can still go in the military, but it opens up the choices that you have.
Sure.
Now you can go as an officer, or you can still go in enlisted like you were planning to do here. Well, I didn't know very much about that at all. So I, again, wind up at Tennessee State. What happens? I'm in Air Force ROTC. That's the process for becoming an officer. So that's exactly what happened. So guidance came along from either my parents, folks in the community, and or for sure my instructors, my teachers while I was going through school. All of them helped to pave that path for me.
Well, that's a perfect segue to my next question, General. Your commitment to education is evident in your journey. Can you elaborate on how it opened the doors for you? You did just there a little bit, but elaborate a little bit more, open the doors for you and influenced your decision to eventually establish a charter school in your hometown.
Sure. Yeah. Well, let me start with education has always been really important in our family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Even though my mother and father, they barely had an education or a formal education. They were pretty smart, but very little formal education.
Mm-hmm.
My father went to the 2nd grade. My mother went to the 6th grade. But guess what? They could read and write, and my father could do math like you just wouldn't believe.
Right.
He was almost like a calculator in his head,
Sure.
And it's one thing that they believed in, even though we were on the farm, and it would have been real easy for them to say, well, you're not going to school today because you're going to help me do whatever needed to be done on the farm.
Right.
They didn't do that. At least they didn't do that very much. They always insisted that we go to school. Their big dreams is that they wanted to get all of us through high school. That's where they could see at that point and how important that was. Mm-hmm. We were fortunate that, several of us went on well beyond that. I had 2 other brothers that were in the Air Force with me as officers and flyers. So education has always been important in the family and in my life and in our lives particularly. And so particularly after I came on into the Air Force, you could see just how education is really the foundation of our democracy.
Mm-hmm.
And in our military, I've always believed, and I used to say this to folks who we were trying to recruit, and that is, if I have an educated force, I'll have a top quality force.
Sure.
Because then we could learn and get to wherever we needed to be. So education has always been a strong part of my life and my belief. My last assignment in the Air Force, I was responsible for Education and Training Command, which meant that I was responsible for all of the Air Force education, all of the Air Force training at every level, whether that was basic boot camp or basic pilot training, all the way through to all of the, top training in the Air Force. And I was also responsible for all of the recruiting. All of that came under my command.
Wow.
And so it was a natural tie for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so how I got into charter school is I got a phone call from one of the folks who was on the launch committee with me at Polaris Tech. They were thinking about starting a charter school, and our school focuses in 6 specific areas, which align with industries that are in and around South Carolina, in and around the community at which the school was going to be located. And one of those focus areas was aviation. And so I don't know how it came up, but of this group that were working together, someone must have mentioned to them, hey, there's this guy named Fig Newton. He's from here and he's a pilot. So I got this phone call asking, would I be interested? And initially I was hesitant because I've heard of and was aware of others who said they were going to do big things in my hometown and my home county, and not much had been done.
Sure.
Okay. So I did some background research and discovered that this group of people were very, serious about what they were talking about and what they planned to do. And many of them were just like me. They had already had a profession and retired and were doing other things, and they just wanted to give back to the community. So I said yes. And I didn't really know anything about charter schools at that point. But it was exciting. I learned a lot, and we were able to get a charter and get it approved and launch a school.
Absolutely. And absolutely. So that school, Polaris Tech Charter School, tell us how you would describe Polaris Tech to someone unfamiliar with the school or with charter schools in general, and then share with us, what impact do you hope the school will have on students and the community?
What we did was we built the philosophy of this school that it is absolutely children first. Now, a lot of schools have that as their philosophy, but we had a different kind of twist to it. We not only did we believe that you must put the children first in decision making and even in the design of the school, whether that's from the building or from the academic model, what have you. Everything has to start from what does that child need to be successful. Mm-hmm. So that was one. The other one was we really focused on, and as one of our principles is that we will meet the child where the child is. We knew right off, and I was a prime example of that all of us don't learn alike. We don't learn at the same speed. So for those who could go really fast, we wanted to help them move fast. For those who were in the middle, we wanted to meet them and focus with them in the middle. And then those that needed more help and maybe was not on grade level or whatever, we wanted to meet them there and then work with them to get them on grade level. So it was this individualized learning. And also we are project-based learning school, meaning that we try to use real world problems and real projects that they can work on as individuals and as a team, as well as then have that relate to whatever the core subject happened to be, whether it's math or whether it's social studies or what have you. But if we're going to talk about things in classroom, then we want to be able to talk about it in a way that we can have them either see it, touch it, or move it in a certain way that it becomes real to them.
Yeah.
That's what we call project-based learning. Okay. In general. And so we think Polaris Tech is different in that way. And we have what we call also blended learning, in that we focus a lot on technology. Every youngster that signs into our school, and it's a public charter school, so I really want to make that very, very clear. So we have to meet all of the standards that South Carolina public schools have to meet.
That's right.
We do have some flexibility because we are charter school and how we approach that, and what our academic model may be. However, we must still meet all of the standards. And so for us, again, we want each one of what we call our learners. We don't call them students. We call them learners, because that's what we want them to be when they come to this school. We issue every one of them, when they walk through the door the very first time to sign up for the school, we issue them a computer. Okay. Every single child has a computer. And we start from there. So it's a combination of technology and classroom instruction that helps us then to help that child develop and grow so that they can become productive citizens in our society and in their communities.
Love it. I love it. So, going back to your role just for a second here, in the Air Force as a fighter pilot, leadership is crucial. What leadership lessons did you learn during your time in the Air Force? And how do you believe those lessons can be applied to education and community development?
Oh, yeah. Well, those lessons learned there from a leadership standpoint definitely applies to education, particularly the educational model and style that we are trying to give to our learners at Polaris Tech. Leadership is like education to me, in that with it, almost anything is possible.
Right.
Without it, hardly nothing is possible. Okay. And that's just true for education. That's also true for leadership. So what did I learn about leadership in the Air Force? I learned that as the leader, you are responsible for everything and for everybody that's in that enterprise. Okay. Now, being responsible for all of that, as a leader, what you really have to do if you're going to be successful at this, you have to create an environment where every member of the team, first of all, you have this team of people that you're going to be working with and working for, and they're working for you. So every member of that team must feel like they are a full team member, feel like they are as important to the team as anybody else on the team.
Absolutely.
And I learned this, and it's amazing how it works. Because what I would tell my young airmen is, look, it doesn't make any difference whether you just got here on yesterday or whether you've been in as long as I had, which was 30 plus years. Okay. I am no more important than you, the fact that I've been here for a long time, because what you do and what I do are just as important, because whatever you are doing is you are contributing to the success of the mission. And if you don't pull your load, the mission won't get done. It just won't, or we're going to be struggling to get it done. And so in school, it's the same way, but for sure in a charter school, it's the same way. Charter schools are much leaner. The organization is much flatter. And so you don't just come in with one specialty and just do that in a charter school. Our folks that work in our school, they do a lot of different things.
That's right.
We call our teachers navigators, because they help our students to navigate their way through these projects and to understand them and to learn from them. So our navigators may be in the classroom doing something. They may be on the car line doing something. They may be helping us prepare for a parent function that are coming along. You must be able to get your hands on many different things.
That's right.
And that demonstrates just how important you are.
Absolutely.
When I was on the Thunderbirds, this was extremely, extremely important. We would do in 1976, the bicentennial. We did over 100 air shows around the country.
Wow.
Okay. And therefore, and we only had like 85 people on the entire team.
Sure.
And we're carrying 8 jets all over the country and putting on demonstration at air shows. What that requires is for everyone to be talented in more than one area. So I would have a supply person that would be my assistant crew chief, okay, on the jet.
Mm-hmm.
And so and they felt good about it. That was the great thing, they could do their specialty as well as do more jobs than their specialties, and they all felt good about it. So leadership applies here as well.
Absolutely.
And I want those youngsters to see, I want those learners to see that, hey, guess what? You can do all of this and more. And that's what our job would be as a part of the school enterprise.
I love it. I love it. And speaking of your leadership, I believe I read at one point in your career, you were over multiple bases, over a dozen, with like approximately 45,000 servicemen and women.
Yeah,
that's leadership,
yeah,
right there. 45,000 people.
Yeah, and obviously, again, I'm if you draw the organizational chart, I'm sitting at the top of that, but certainly I can't do and cannot lead all of those 45,000 people. And that's just 45,000 of those that were on active duty.
Right.
I still had folks who were in the reserve. I had some 14,000 civilians and so on. And I'm responsible for all of those, which I mentioned earlier. But I had a great team of people who helped me to make all of that happen.
Right.
And so what I wanted to do is to be able to inspire and to motivate those 45,000 people so that we could get the job done of training America's airmen and turning them into combat veterans so they could go out and execute the mission of the United States Air Force.
Absolutely. Well, the latest mission at Polaris Tech was to expand, to offer more grade levels. Tell us about that decision and what led you to make that move at Polaris Tech.
Yeah. Well, we launched the school initially with 6th through 12th grade. We wanted to start there, and we thought that would work well for us because, again, we wanted to get folks into just this project-based learning concept that we were talking about. But shortly after, like a year or so after we got started, we discovered that, we really need to get to them earlier so that they can be with us longer as we transition them. So we were bringing in learners from other schools into our school at that 6th grade and up level. And this whole concept to them would be very foreign to them.
Sure.
So what we wanted to do is get folks, when they initially start school, to be thinking in this direction. And so now by the time what we're anticipating is, and we're in our first year of that K through 5.
Right.
And so we're anticipating next year, for instance, when our 5th graders move over to be 6th graders, you mentioned project-based learning to them. They would have already known.
Right.
You see, they would have already been through projects and understand the concept. So that was the driving for doing that. And it then, there were other aspects of it. For instance, there were some families who had learners who were in, say, 8th grade, but they had some that were in 4th grade, and now they have to take them to 2 different schools because we don't have transportation for our charter school like the traditional public school does. Doing it this way, now they could bring everybody to the same school. Okay. So there were several reasons why we needed to do this, and we can already feel and see the differences that it's going to make. And we're really, really pleased with the fact that we were fortunate enough to find the resources to get a new facility built, bring on the K through 5 grades in that building, then 6 through 12 is in the original.
Absolutely. And had the opportunity to come down recently and take a look at the new building and facility, and it's absolutely fantastic. And just as a side note, it's right across the street from the airport.
Absolutely.
So,
Which I
absolutely,
love.
I know you do. I know you do.
Yeah, we do. We do have I mentioned, and for the audience, I mentioned the 6 focus areas that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And those are business management, medical services, logistics, manufacturing, obviously IT, and aviation.
Yeah.
So we want our youngsters and our learners, when they leave Polaris Tech, you could talk about any of those areas, and they will have a basic concept of what that means.
Absolutely.
Now, when they leave, they're not going to be pilots by the time they leave from us, and so on. But when and that's the other thing that I think I bring to the table is help to expose them to ideas and opportunities that they normally wouldn't get exposed to,
right.
Particularly being from a small town. And this is really what happened to me. I didn't know anything about aviation before I left South Carolina, but I learned. And my first time I ever flew in an airplane was at Tennessee State. So I want our youngsters to kind of had all of those kinds of experiences by the time they finish high school. And many of them are getting,
absolutely.
We're able to take them on trips. We can talk about it in the classroom. We can take them on trips. And they can see for themselves the kind of possibilities that
making those connections with students is really what it's all about. And I think our charter schools do that, frankly, better than anyone, making a connection, finding that spark in a student to connect and have interest and keep them engaged. Absolutely. So what's the future for Polaris Tech Charter? Where do you hope to take the school in the next, let's say, 5 years?
Yeah, well, my dream is, and I've talked with a number of the folks who were a part of the launch committee. It was 11 of us. We're still connected with the school, either on the board like I am or in other capacities. But the dream now is that we have just, with the addition of the lower grades, we've moved from about 300 students to 530 the last time we had a count. So we're looking for an average of 550 learners in both parts of the school.
Right.
Okay, total. We don't want to get any bigger than. We're from now on, we really want to focus on quality. We want our learners, when they graduate from Polaris Tech, that they will feel very, very confident about, number one, they will have a plan of where they want to start from after they leave Polaris Tech. And we feel like they will be very, very comfortable about going out and starting to execute that plan. It doesn't mean they have to stay with it for the rest of their lives, but it gives them a stepping off point. It gives them a launch point to go out and explore the world and, again, be productive citizens for their communities as well as for the country.
Absolutely. Well, I have one last question. Before I let you go today, your story is one of breaking barriers, defying expectations. So how do you hope your experiences can inspire the next generation, particularly young people, which I know you have an affection for and leading and guiding, who may face, similar challenge or barriers in general to pursuing their dreams?
Yeah. Well, the real hope is, and I've already begun to see some of this. Again, it doesn't make any difference who that young person is and what their background happened to be. I want to try to relate to all of them and say, look, you need to set your goals and your dreams high because you can achieve this. Just take a look at the road that I've traveled and how steep that hill might have been for me. This hill is not near as steep for you. So you can get to the top of this, okay? And it's not about where you are now. It's about how you're making decisions on where you want to get to. And if you make the right decision, you can get there. I'm almost guaranteed. And there's going to always be someone who will say, I'm willing to give you a hand to get to where you want to be. Because all of us, I tell a lot of them, look, I'm well along in my life. So we are all depending on you, okay, to build the kind of resources it needs so that our country will always be a great nation, and you can even make it greater, okay, by bringing on the kinds of things that you will be learning and you will be experiencing. And time will change, yes, but you need to be a part of that future of what this all is going to be. And then the other opportunity that I have is, like I mentioned earlier, I want to expose them to as much as I possibly can. Absolutely. Across the full spectrum, whether that's in the arts or whether that's in technology, the full spectrum I want to expose them to and let them decide on what they want to be and how they want to get there.
Wise words from a wise man and a true leader. General Newton, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk with SC Charter Chatter and sharing your story. It was a great pleasure of mine, and I appreciate what you do to serve our charter community in South Carolina.
Well, thanks so much, and it was great to be on the program, and I hope I was able to contribute at least a little bit here. It's a great way of life, I can promise you.
That wraps up episode 21 of SC Charter Chatter. My thanks again to General Fig Newton at Polaris Tech Charter School. Make sure you subscribe to SC Charter so you don't miss our next episode as we highlight other charter school leaders from around the state. As always, thanks for listening and your all-around support. Be sure to follow us and don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. Let us know what you think of the show. Our email is podcast@scharterschools.org. You can also share topics or ideas for the show. Again, podcast@scharterschools.org. Like us on Facebook and Instagram at SC Charter Schools, on Twitter, SC Charter School, and remember to use the hashtag MyCharterSC. Until next time, I'm Kevin.